They say the jungle never forgets, but it hides everything it remembers. In the deepest heart of the Amazon, where light touches nothing but mist, there are stories older than language. Stories of corridors made of stone, stretching beneath the roots of the forest. The tribes speak of them in whispers, not myths, but warnings, as if the ground itself is listening. They call them the paths of the buried sun. Long before the first outsiders came with compasses and greed, these stories told of a world built under the world. Vast tunnels carved with impossible precision, wide enough for rivers to flow and voices to echo without end. The elders say those corridors were not made by gods nor by men. They were made by the first ones, beings who lived before the sky hardened, when the earth was soft and alive. They shaped the underworld like potters shape clay, breathing heat into the walls until stone itself obeyed. They built where no roots grew and left no smoke behind. Some tribes call them the builders, others the listeners, for they say the tunnels themselves can still hear. If you speak too loudly in certain parts of the forest, your voice comes back wrong, not as an echo, but as something answering. When anthropologists first recorded these tales in the early 1900s, they dismissed them as primitive metaphors, but the patterns persisted. Across hundreds of miles, tribes with no contact repeated the same descriptions. Massive vaulted halls beneath the soil, pillars carved with symbols that glowed when touched, and stone so smooth it reflected firelight like metal. Always there was a warning. The deeper you go, the more the walls breathe. Some said the tunnels lead to a heart, a chamber where the earth itself still remembers being alive. One legend from the Matses tribe tells of a hunter who fell through the forest floor chasing an injured tapir. He landed in darkness but found he could stand. Around him was stone, not rock, but architecture. He followed the sound of dripping water until he reached a corridor lined with carvings. The walls showed trees growing upside down, roots reaching into the sky. He walked for what felt like hours before he heard footsteps behind him, his own, perfectly mirrored. When he looked back, the tunnel was gone. Only smooth walls, seamless and silent. He climbed for days before finding light again. His hair had turned gray. Explorers who ventured deep enough claimed to hear strange resonances beneath the ground, metallic hums, rhythmic pulses, sometimes faint, sometimes strong enough to make the soil tremble. They sound like something vast moving far below, something still operating after millennia. Scientists call it tectonic stress, shifting basalt plates, or trapped air cavities. The locals simply say, it's the corridors breathing. There are drawings in remote villages that depict these underground halls, not crude sketches, but precise blueprints. Lines running parallel, intersections marked by circular chambers, symbols resembling compasses. One missionary in 1896 collected such drawings and sent them to Europe. They disappeared en route, but his journal survived. In it he wrote, "The elders draw the tunnels from memory, not imagination. They say their ancestors once walked to them during the time when the sun hid underground." Even today, some tribes refuse to build huts in certain clearings, saying the ground beneath is hollow. Hunters describe hearing hollow thunder when it rains, sound that comes from below, not above. They tap the soil and feel vibration, faint but undeniable. That is where the old ones sleep, they say. Their city still breathes under the roots. When modern explorers tried to investigate with sonar, they found anomalies, consistent, repeating voids arranged in geometric grids, long, narrow cavities at depths where no natural cave should exist. The data was inconclusive. Funding was cut. But the patterns match what the tribal stories had always described: parallel corridors, intersecting chambers, and a central node, the heart. One archaeologist, Dr. Helena Suarez, once followed a lead near the Javari Valley. She found a sinkhole emitting a faint current of cold air. Inside, the walls were perfectly vertical, smooth to the touch, almost polished. 10 meters down, she found carvings resembling constellations, but not our constellations. These were inverted, mirrored as though seen from beneath the sky. When she returned to the surface, her instruments had lost calibration. Her compass spun in circles. She wrote, "Something below us manipulates direction itself." Her report was never published. The tribes tell another version. They say the corridors are not ruins at all, but veins, the body of the earth itself. When people walk them, the ground remembers their steps. That's why the forest guards its entrances. It grows over them, heals them, hides them. Roots become locks, vines become barriers. The jungle isn't protecting us from what's below. It's protecting what's below from us. Some say the builders didn't die. They went deeper. They built downward until they reached the heart, where time slows and the stone becomes soft again. They live there still, watching the surface through vibrations, listening to our footsteps. The tremors we call earthquakes are their movements, slow, deliberate shifts of an ancient intelligence stretching in its sleep. In the villages near the Purus River, there are songs sung during eclipses, low, droning hymns meant to remind the earth of light. The lyrics describe a city with no shadows, a sun beneath the roots, and walls that sing when touched. These songs are never performed for outsiders. To the tribes, they are not entertainment. They are communication, a way of maintaining balance with whatever lies beneath it. Modern instruments have started to confirm strange acoustic behavior in certain regions. Low-frequency vibrations around 32 Hz, periodic and structured, too consistent for natural explanation. It matches the frequency recorded during earthquakes, except there are no earthquakes. It's almost as if something is generating a heartbeat from below. Engineers have no answer. The locals already do. They say the heart of the old world still beats, slow and patient, deep under the Amazon. There are also reports of explorers disappearing near these rumored entrances, camps found untouched except for circular burns on the ground, gear left humming, batteries drained. Search teams hear strange echoes that mimic their own voices. Some recordings captured whispers repeating the word return. The sound waves showed mirror inversion, identical to how echoes would reflect in a sealed, metallic environment. As if the jungle was made of walls, one technician said, and yet no one can locate these entrances twice. They move. A clearing that reveals stone 1 month will be overgrown the next. A cave sealed by roots reopens miles away. It's as if the corridors shift underfoot, sliding through the layers of soil like a living maze. The tribes say this is natural. The corridors are not lost, they explain. They are dreaming. They move when they dream. There's a strange unity between the myth and the evidence. The geometry, the sound, the anomalies, they all point to something constructed, something intelligent. Not myth, not random, purposeful. And maybe that's the reason the forest remains untouched by time, because it's built on a foundation that was never alive but has learned how to imitate life. Even the language of the stories carries echoes of engineering, words that translate as chamber, gate, flow, pulse. The people who pass down these tales are describing machinery through poetry, systems through myth. The stone was soft, they say. It drank our fire. What if that wasn't metaphor? What if the builders found a way to mold the earth itself, to create a material that heals, hums, remembers? In a few remote places, explorers have reported the impossible. The sound of dripping water in a place with no moisture, a faint metallic scent, lightless tunnels that reflect torchlight too perfectly. They talk about the feeling of being watched by the walls themselves, as if something within the stone studies you, recognizes you, and then chooses whether you belong. Some say they felt warmth coming from the walls. Others claim to have heard voices, not in their ears, but in their chest, resonating with their heartbeat. Those who return never sound the same. They speak slowly, their eyes unfocused, describing light patterns that move through darkness like slow lightning. One man said, "It was not a tunnel, it was a throat." Another said, "It was waiting." Whatever these corridors are, they are not abandoned. They are aware. Perhaps the truth is simpler and far more terrifying. The tribes aren't describing ruins at all. They're describing an organism, the living foundation beneath the Amazon. The stone corridors aren't artifacts of lost civilization. They're arteries of the planet, ancient and sentient, carrying memory instead of blood. The builders weren't gods or aliens or ghosts. They were humans who learned too much, who dug too deep into the body of the earth and never came back. The forest doesn't protect them because it loves them. It protects them because they're still there, breathing beneath our feet, waiting for the right vibration. A voice, a sound, a key to open the paths again. And every thunderstorm, every earthquake, every human intrusion shakes the surface just a little closer to that frequency. The jungle listens. The corridors remember. The question is not whether they exist. The question is when they'll open. In one of the oldest oral traditions passed between generations of the Ashaninka people, there is a final prophecy. It says that when the metal stars, what they now interpret as satellites, begin to watch the forest from above, the corridors below will awaken to watch them back. The earth will hum louder, rivers will shift course, and those who can hear the low sounds in their sleep will be called below to bear witness to the rebirth of the forgotten city. They describe it not as destruction, but as remembering, the world remembering its other half. Some elders still warn travelers not to record in those regions, not to map, not to listen too closely. They say every recording device becomes a mirror for the corridors, a way for them to learn the surface language again. Every word spoken about them becomes another vibration in their direction, an invitation. The tunnels do not open from below, one elder said. They open from attention. Perhaps that's why the forest swallows so much evidence. The journals, the recordings, the samples, the lives. Not because the truth is hidden, but because it cannot exist in two worlds at once. If the corridors are remembered too clearly, they return. And maybe that's why the tribes whisper instead of speak, because silence is the last wall left between us and them. Somewhere beneath the roots, the corridors are listening, waiting, remembering the sound of footsteps they once called their own. In the Amazon, silence is never really silent. Even at night, the forest hums, insects ticking, leaves dripping, frogs pulsing like tiny machines. But there are moments when all that life stops, when the jungle holds its breath, as if listening to something older. That's when explorers say they hear it, a metallic echo, deep underground, where no metal should exist. It begins softly, like a hammer striking far below. Sometimes it rings sharp and cold, sometimes hollow, as if the jungle floor hides an iron cathedral beneath it. And then it repeats, rhythmic, measured, too deliberate to be random. You feel it before you truly hear it, a faint vibration in your bones. And that's the moment every explorer knows. They've crossed into a place that doesn't want to be disturbed. The first reports came more than a century ago. In 1896, Peruvian naturalist Dr. Isandro Vela described a bell-like vibration beneath the Madeira Basin. His guides refused to go further, saying the forest was speaking in metal. Vela dismissed it as superstition, until his compass spun wild and his instruments began to tremble on their own. Each night, the sound grew louder until it suddenly vanished. When he tried to find the same place again, the terrain was gone, replaced by new growth, as if the forest had swallowed its own skin. Among the tribes, the sound has a name. The Yamanawa call it the iron song of the earth. The Matsis say it's the heartbeat of the serpent. They warn that when it hums 3 times, something beneath the ground awakens. To them, the metallic echo isn't just sound, it's language, a warning, a voice of whatever sleeps below the roots. In 1954, a Brazilian prospector named Edmar Gouveia heard what he described as hammering beneath the soil near the Jutai River. Mechanical, deliberate, like workers trapped beneath the world. That night, their camp shook violently. By morning, one of his men was gone, and the forest had changed shape. Gouveia quit exploration forever, writing only one final sentence in his notebook: the earth was not empty. Modern scientists try to explain it. They say the echoes are caused by shifting stone, gas pockets, or deep-seated tectonic vibration. But these sounds don't follow the rhythm of earthquakes or water movement. They follow people. Every time a team drills, digs, or strikes the ground with metal tools, the echo begins again, as if the jungle recognizes intrusion and answers. In 1971, researchers from Sao Paulo University captured low-frequency metallic pulses near the Purus River, exactly 32 hertz, repeating every 11 seconds. No seismic event was recorded. When they played back the audio, the pattern matched the rhythm of human breathing. That night, several team members claimed to hear the tone through the soil itself. One man said it felt like someone knocking from inside the earth. Another developed a fever and refused to sleep. The team fled. The data was locked in archives labeled acoustic anomaly, unresolved. For the tribes, these aren't anomalies, they're messages. They believe the forest communicates through vibration. When explorers bring modern metal, machetes, rifles, batteries, those objects begin to sing back to the underground, a faint ring at first. then a hum that spreads through every tool, every plate, every buckle, until, one night, your entire camp resonates with invisible sound. And the next morning, someone is missing. In 2004, a British documentary crew working near the Rio Tapajos captured 47 seconds of what they described as metal scraping beneath stone. Their microphones picked up harmonic frequencies impossible in nature, tones layered like a machine breathing. Within months, 2 members of that team died of unexplained respiratory failure. The recordings were never released. Locals said the team had camped near one of the serpent's mouths, a breathing vent between the worlds. Some geologists suggest the metallic tones could come from magnetic minerals under strain, but when scientists tested those regions, their instruments repeatedly malfunctioned. Compasses reversed polarity, recordings glitched into a single repeating tone, and always, the same bass frequency appeared. 32 hertz, too perfect, too consistent to be random, almost as if the sound was self-correcting, intelligent, aware. One physicist tried to investigate it in 2013 using ground-penetrating radar. The scans revealed large, symmetrical voids, not caves, but chambers, less than 40 meters below the surface. When she drilled a small test bore, the bit bent into a perfect spiral, as though it had been twisted by unseen hands. That night, the camp heard it too, a distant bell ringing through the soil. It grew stronger until their sensors overheated. The recordings were corrupted, filled with one continuous tone that pulsed like a heartbeat. The tribes say those echoes come from the light metal bones of the builders, ancient beings who shaped the jungle before humanity existed. They claim the corridors beneath the Amazon were lined with a metal that sings when touched, alive with resonance. Some shamans say the builders still breathe through it. Others warn that the metallic sound is not a call, but a test, a way to measure who is listening. Even today, explorers describe the same impossible experience. They enter a region, hear a faint metallic hum underfoot, and feel an overwhelming pressure in the air. Not pain, but a presence. One researcher described it as standing next to an invisible engine. Another said the sound came from inside his chest, not from the ground. And when they leave, the ringing doesn't fade. It follows them home. It plays softly in their ears as they fall asleep, as if something deep beneath the Amazon has learned their frequency. Psychologists call it auditory imprinting, a brain trick after sensory trauma, but the tribes call it the seed of metal. They believe once you hear the echo, you carry it forever. The builders mark you through sound. From that day, machines will recognize you. You'll hear the same tone in the hum of fluorescent lights, in elevator motors, in the pause before a phone connects. The underground remembers your vibration and calls you back through every piece of steel you touch. There's a chilling theory among researchers who've compared all the audio archives. No matter the year, the location, or the equipment, the echoes always begin the same way, a single metallic pulse, followed by 3 ascending tones. The same sequence has been recorded in 1896, 1954, 1971, 2004, and 2013. When translated into sound notation, those tones form a simple musical signature, almost like a greeting. One scientist privately admitted, if it's communication, it's been repeating the same message for over 100 years. At night, when the rain quiets and fog settles, explorers still claim to hear it, that faint metallic breath rising through the soil. It isn't loud. It doesn't echo like thunder. It just exists. A low hum that seems to move closer when you stay still. Some say it's mechanical. Some say it's alive. But everyone agrees on one thing. Once you've heard it, you'll never forget the tone, because the echo doesn't just come from the ground. It comes from the part of you that suddenly realizes the jungle is listening back. And maybe that's the truth no one wants to face. Maybe the Amazon isn't hiding ruins or treasure or lost cities. Maybe it's hiding something far stranger, a living memory of metal and sound, buried deep below, waiting for anyone foolish enough to strike the earth and wake it again. They say the forest hides what it fears most. And in the Amazon, that fear is marked, not by bones or ruins, but by the trees themselves. The tribes call them the Watchers, ancient trunks scarred with symbols that no one admits carving. Symbols that seem to appear overnight, carved too clean, too deep, too high for any human hand to reach. Explorers who stumble upon them say the marks look almost alive, like the bark itself burned the message inward. Lines, spirals, circles, arrows, faces that don't belong to this world. Some point downward, always downward, toward places no one is supposed to go. The first explorers thought the carvings were tribal warnings, but the tribes denied it. "We do not mark the forest," they said. "The forest marks itself." To them, those symbols weren't art, they were seals. Each one guarding a place where the earth opens, where roots give way to stone, where something sleeps beneath. They call those places the throat of the world. The elders say if you follow the carved trees long enough, they will lead you straight to a forbidden entrance, a mouth in the earth that once swallowed the first humans whole. Somewhere in the 1920s, a missionary named Father Alvarez wrote about stumbling across a row of marked trees near the Solomois River. He described the carvings as a language of wounds. Each tree carried a variation of the same symbol, an open circle crossed by a downward line. The last tree in the sequence had been split by lightning, exposing a hollow trunk that led into darkness. He sent 2 men inside with torches. They never came back. When locals returned the next morning, the hollow had sealed, not burned or broken, but fused as if the wood had melted shut. Alvarez never spoke of it again. To scientists, these carvings should be impossible. Trees in the Amazon heal quickly. Bark closes over any cut in months, sometimes weeks. But the forbidden symbols remain centuries old, their edges as sharp as if carved yesterday. Some show metallic residue in the grooves, fragments of an unknown alloy fused into the sap. Under infrared light, they shimmer faintly, as if still alive with some old charge. A geologist once took a sample back to his lab. His notebook later said, "The wood resists analysis. Every instrument hums when near it." The page ends there. The tribes believe the symbols are warnings left by the builders, the same beings said to have created the underground corridors. Each carving marks a breath hole, a vent between the world of roots and the world of stone. The trees grow over them like guardians, sealing the wound. The marks are their way of saying, "This is where the air is wrong." Shamans say that when wind passes through those hidden holes, the trees absorb the breath of the sleeping city below. That breath leaves scars, symbols burned not by blade, but by memory. In the 1970s, a logging company in Acre tried to clear a section of forest for timber. Workers found hundreds of marked trees forming a wide spiral pattern across several hectares. Every time they cut one down, a strange odor filled the air, metallic, sweet, suffocating. The logs bled black sap. Within a week, half the workers developed rashes that glowed faintly under UV light. The company burned the site and abandoned it. Satellites show the same spiral still growing today, the new trees carrying the same markings on their bark as if the pattern is replicating itself. There's an eerie pattern to the carvings. Some are so high they could only have been etched when the tree was still young, which means the mark grew upward with the bark, stretching and warping over centuries. Yet the symbols retain their proportions, like they're resisting time. Others seem to align with magnetic north, pointing exactly toward known anomalous zones, places where compasses fail and metallic echoes are heard from underground. It's as if the trees are compasses themselves, guiding anyone who understands the code toward the entrances that must remain closed. One explorer, in 1988, followed a line of marked trees deep into uncharted forest. He described hearing the sound of water underground, though the soil beneath him was solid. The air turned cold. His GPS, a rare luxury then, stopped working. The final tree in the sequence bore a mark unlike the others, an eye, perfectly oval, carved clean through the bark and into the wood beneath. Beneath it, the ground had collapsed slightly, revealing a dark opening barely large enough for a person to enter. He shone his flashlight inside and saw steps descending, stone steps, smooth and wet. Then his light flickered out. When he turned back, the path behind him was gone. Only trees. Only silence. He returned to camp 2 days later, covered in mud. His boots melted as if exposed to acid. His journal ends with 5 words. They see through the bark. Modern explorers who've documented these carvings agree on one chilling detail. The symbols change. A tree photographed one year will display different markings the next. Sometimes entire lines vanish. Sometimes a new spiral appears where there was none. And sometimes, if you look closely at the carvings at night with infrared, the lines appear to move. Slowly. Breathing. expanding and contracting with the pulse of the forest, as though the tree itself is alive with memory, repeating the same old message in a language no human can translate. Scientists, desperate for reason, suggest natural causes, fungal growth patterns, lightning scarring, insect trails mistaken for carvings. But that doesn't explain why the shapes repeat across thousands of kilometers, from Peru to Brazil to Colombia, identical in ratio and angle. Nor does it explain why tribes who have never met each other use the same words to describe them: the forest's eyes, the wounds of the builders, the path that should not be followed. Some botanists now believe the trees might be reacting to electromagnetic anomalies, subtle radiation escaping from underground chambers, etching patterns through biological stress. But one researcher who mapped these locations noticed something else. When plotted on a grid, the trees' positions form a network that perfectly mirrors the star pattern of the Southern Cross, rotated 180 degrees, as though reflected in water. The implication is impossible. The marks are both map and mirror. The forest is drawing the heavens in reverse, marking the spots where Earth touches something cosmic below. Explorers say when you stand near a marked tree, the air feels wrong, thicker, like breathing through glass. Animals avoid them. Birds don't perch on the branches. If you place your hand over the carving, you can feel vibration, faint, rhythmic, like a distant heartbeat traveling through the trunk. Locals say that's the pulse of the sleeping city below, pushing through its roots, warning those who listen to turn back. They also say that if you carve over those symbols, you invite something that walks on sound alone. No one who's tried has lived long enough to explain what that means. One story, told quietly among guides, describes a young logger who tried to erase one of the carvings. He sliced into the bark with his machete. Immediately, the blade turned dull. The wound began to bleed. Not sap, but a silvery liquid that steamed on contact with air. That night, the logger woke up screaming that he could hear trees whispering. He clawed at his ears until he went deaf. His last words were, "It's calling from inside the wood." His body was found at the base of the same tree, roots wrapped tightly around his legs. Some researchers believe the carvings are territorial signals, the forest's way of regulating what humans are allowed to see. The tribes say otherwise. They say the trees are warning signs left by the earth itself, living seals grown over forbidden doors. And every time someone cuts them down, another door opens, another breath escapes, another echo begins. When you move through the Amazon and see bark that has been wounded in perfect geometry, you have two choices: turn around or keep following. Those who turn back still hear the forest sigh behind them. Those who keep walking don't usually return. The last sound they hear, the tribes say, is not the rustle of leaves or the cry of a bird, but the soft metallic hum of roots vibrating beneath their feet, guiding them toward the mouth that never stops waiting. Because the trees are not just pointing the way, they're remembering it. They're guardians with scars for eyes, marking the boundary between life and the silence that came before it. And in a forest that breathes and dreams, every mark is a message. The way below is open, but it does not lead back. The Amazon hides things the way an ocean hides bones, not by burying them, but by feeding them to life itself. The deeper you go, the less the forest feels like wilderness and more like something alive that has been eating history for centuries. And what it eats most often, explorers say, are ruins. Not the neat kind you see in museums, not temples or palaces, but twisted fragments of stone half swallowed by roots and vines, structures that seem to resist being understood. The jungle doesn't destroy them, it digests them. Somewhere between the Purus and Madeira rivers, the ground starts to change. You'll walk for hours through ordinary green until suddenly, the forest floor hardens beneath your feet. Not soil, stone. Flat, cold, and impossibly smooth. Then you look around and realize the trees are growing out of it. Massive trunks splitting old staircases, vines hanging over what looks like an archway, their roots pouring through cracks like veins through bone. You're standing on architecture, but it's so old, the forest doesn't even remember it's there. The first outsiders to see these ruins didn't even recognize them. In the early 1900s, rubber tappers wrote about stone floors that hum in the rain, slabs covered in moss, arranged in grids too perfect to be natural. When it rained, the water slid across them in sheets, running into holes that descended into darkness. Some of those holes, they said, exhaled air so cold it turned your breath white. One man threw a pebble down and heard it bounce, once, twice, then vanish into silence. Days later, his skin began to peel. His guide told him he had angered the sleeping place of the builders. Archaeologists later dismissed the reports as exaggeration, but satellite scans began revealing geometric clearings, lines of vegetation growing in perfect rectangles, invisible from the ground. When researchers went to verify them, they found something stranger. Not ruins covered by roots. Ruins merged with them. The stone and the wood had fused, impossible to separate. Roots that should have cracked walls apart instead wrapped them with surgical precision, as if preserving rather than destroying. Every vine traced the shape of the architecture underneath, almost like memory etched in living tissue. One of the most famous discoveries came in 1977 when a botanist named Lucia Ferrer stumbled upon a structure she described as a cathedral turned inside out. Roots had formed columns where walls should have been. Every trunk curved the same way, rising into arches overhead. Beneath her feet, under layers of moss, she found carvings, spirals and faces almost erased. Her team tried to clean one with brushes, but the stone bled sap. Not water. Sap. A sticky amber fluid seeping from the cracks as if the forest itself was defending the ruin from exposure. They left that night. She never returned to that region. To the tribes, these overgrown ruins aren't relics. They're wounds. They say the earth grew over them the way skin grows over a scar. The forest didn't swallow the old cities. It healed them shut. The elders speak of the green burial, a time when the builders fell and the forest rose to bury their mistakes. Roots are not roots, one shaman said. They are veins carrying memory down where light cannot touch. According to legend, the vines that cover the stone feed not on sunlight, but on silence, the energy of whatever still hums below the surface. In the 1980s, a joint Brazilian-German expedition tried to excavate one of these overgrown sites near the Juruá River. Within days, their machinery broke down, hydraulic drills jammed, motors overheated. Every cable, every metal part began to corrode overnight. The scientists called it biological sabotage. The locals called it justice. One surviving technician claimed the vines weren't ordinary. Their fibers were metallic under the microscope, their cells laced with silicate structures that shouldn't exist in any plant. When burned, they didn't turn to ash. They turned to dust that smelled like ozone. The deeper you look, the more unnatural it gets. Beneath those ruins are layers of architecture that seem designed for something not quite human. Ceilings too low, corridors that narrow into throat-like passages, stone tables shaped for bodies that don't fit human proportions. And always the same pattern, faces carved into the corners, eyes closed, mouths open, as if mid-breath. When explorers shine light on them, the shadows inside the mouths appear to move. Some swear the faces hum back when the wind passes through. Scientists argue that what's seen as architecture might simply be geology, ancient rock formations reshaped by tree growth. But that argument breaks down when you notice the symmetry. Each ruin aligns with celestial patterns, solstice points, lunar angles, constellations now invisible from the forest floor. Someone built with knowledge that required the sky. Yet the sky hasn't been visible here for 1,000 years. It's as though the builders designed these places knowing the forest would consume them, as if their temples were meant to be buried alive. In recent years, drones have mapped a few of these areas using thermal imaging. What they found is unsettling. Beneath the thickest vegetation, the ruins still emit heat, faint but consistent, even at night. The pattern looks like veins glowing in a body. When rain falls, the readings spike, as if the ruins absorb energy from water. Some archaeologists think the structures might contain metallic minerals that react chemically. But the tribes whisper another answer. The ruins aren't stone, they're the skeletons of something that's still alive. One local guide told a story that chills even seasoned explorers. He said that long ago, a group of foreign researchers tried to cut through the root of one of the buried temples. As soon as the blade hit, the jungle went silent. The trees stopped moving. The guide heard a sound, deep, resonant, like a drum under the soil. The next moment, the ground opened. Vines shot upward, twisting around the men, pulling them down, not killing them, but cocooning them. He swore he saw one man still breathing through the roots before the forest closed over. The ruins protect themselves, he said. The city is not asleep, it's dreaming. To the scientific mind, this sounds like myth, a fusion of fear and imagination. But explorers who've stood among those ruins describe the same strange feeling, a pulse in the ground, the sense that the stone beneath your boots is not dead, that the roots aren't random, that everything around you is part of a single organism, half forest, half memory. The jungle isn't growing over ruins. The ruins have become the jungle. There's one final detail most reports leave out: the smell. Not decay, not rot, but something sterile, metallic, electric, almost surgical, like standing inside an old machine. Some say that's what the builders left behind, a living architecture meant to outlast them, now camouflaged by vines that learn to mimic life. If that's true, then what explorers find in those places isn't history at all. It's a body still functioning after its creators vanished. And maybe that's why the Amazon resists excavation. Every time someone digs too deep, the forest responds. With roots, with water, with silence. It covers the wound again, sealing away what should not breathe our air. Because those ruins aren't ruins. They're memories the earth refuses to forget. And maybe, somewhere below those tangled roots, the real city still exists. Intact, patient, waiting for the moment the green shroud finally opens again, and the old world exhales. The jungle has laws that no explorer understands, and the first one is simple. Listen when the locals tell you to stop. Every village in the Amazon has stories about the tunnels, the ones buried under soil and myth, and every story ends the same way, with a warning whispered like a prayer. The tribes don't just say the tunnels are cursed, they say they're guarded, protected by spirits that do not forgive trespass, spirits that do not kill with violence, but with memory, twisting your thoughts until you forget who you are and walk willingly into the dark. When outsiders laugh, the locals only shake their heads. It's not ghosts, they say, it's guardians. They speak of beings that live between the breath of the forest and the silence beneath it. Shapes made of mist, wind, and echoes. They are not dead because they were never alive the way humans are. They belong to the earth itself, the keepers of the tunnels, the ones who remember why they were sealed. Long before explorers arrived, the shamans already had a name for them, the listeners beneath. They are said to dwell where sound dies, in the tunnels so deep that words stop working. The elders say that when people first built the underground cities, they carved too far into the bones of the world and awoke something vast. When the builders vanished, the listeners stayed behind to guard what they left, and to punish those who tried to uncover it again. Every tribe describes the spirits differently. The Matsas say they appear as pale shapes that shimmer in fog, headless but breathing. The Tikuna claim they are the voices of ancestors who chose to remain below. The Huni Queen say they travel through air as vibration, invisible but heavy, making your chest tighten and your heartbeat match theirs. But every version agrees on one thing. Once they know your name, the jungle will never let you leave. There's a story from 1932 about a group of prospectors searching for gold near the Upper Jarua. They hired local guides who warned them not to camp near the breathing stones. That night, one of the men laughed, pounded his rifle butt on the ground, and shouted, "If there are spirits here, come out and show yourselves." Minutes later, the air went cold. The fire dimmed. They heard what sounded like whispering in the trees, not words, but breath. The next morning, his tent was empty. The others found his footprints leading into the jungle, perfectly straight, no sign of struggle. The prints stopped at a patch of wet earth where the ground was still vibrating. They never found him. Modern explorers don't talk about spirits, but they describe the same sensation. Pressure in the air, the sudden absence of sound, the feeling that something is standing directly behind you. Compasses fail, drones crash, and cameras record static shaped like faces that vanish frame by frame. You can dismiss superstition, but you can't argue with silence that feels alive. The locals say the guardians don't appear to kill. They appear to warn. They begin softly, a rustling that doesn't match the wind, a voice that sounds like your own whispering from behind a tree, or a flash of light that pulses like breathing deep in the canopy. The first time, they only watch. The second time, they follow. The third time, they speak your name. If you ignore that, the jungle itself turns against you. Paths rearrange, rivers flood, animals vanish. You walk in circles until you forget why you came. In 1969, a young anthropologist named Rafael Barros vanished while documenting legends near the Javari Valley. His last diary entry reads, "The villagers warn of spirits under the earth. They do not want me here, but I have heard them. Low, metallic voices calling from beneath the ground when the rain stops. It's not fear I feel, it's invitation." His body was never found, but his tape recorder was recovered months later, still sealed in plastic. The last recording was 32 seconds of breathing, slow, mechanical, inhuman, followed by a whisper that said his name. Tribal shamans perform rituals near suspected tunnel entrances. They burn herbs that smell like iron and chant in rhythmic pulses meant to match the heartbeat of the earth. To outsiders, it looks like superstition. To the tribes, it's negotiation. The guardians aren't enemies, they're balance keepers. The shamans say the tunnels are not abandoned. They are part of the forest's circulatory system. And when men dig too deep, the spirits react the way a body reacts to infection, with fever. One elder explained it this way: the forest is alive, and the tunnels are its dreams. The spirits are the dreamers inside the dream. If you wake them, the forest forgets itself. So, they defend their sleep by confusing yours. Explorers who have ignored that advice report losing hours, even days. They describe walking in daylight only to find the sun setting within minutes, as if time itself had slowed to match their heartbeat. Some came back with no memory of what happened between one step and the next. Others came back mute, staring into the trees as if waiting for them to answer. There's a belief among several tribes that the spirits can sense light. Not see it, but feel it vibrate. Artificial light especially. Flashlights and headlamps anger them. That's why locals always approach suspected tunnels with torches made of tree resin. Natural flame, warm and alive. Fire, they say, reminds the guardians of life. Electricity reminds them of intrusion. One explorer who ignored that rule in 1998 reported that his flashlight began to flicker uncontrollably. The beam bent downward, illuminating what looked like a human face carved into the earth itself. He dropped the light. When he picked it up again, the carving was gone, but the soil still looked wet, as if something had just pulled away. The deeper truth behind these stories might never be proven. Some scientists believe the legends are metaphors for real dangers: methane pockets, toxic gases, or geological phenomena that drive intruders mad. But even if that's true, it doesn't explain the precision of the warnings. How did people centuries ago know exactly where the dangerous zones were? Why do their myths align perfectly with the areas where modern instruments detect strange underground resonances? Either the tribes inherited knowledge from forgotten civilizations, or they learned to communicate with something older than civilization itself. Many explorers who've returned from these places say the same thing. I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in being watched. They talk about dreams that continue long after they leave the forest. Dreams of tunnels breathing, of eyes behind roots, of voices saying, "Not yet." One even claimed that his GPS device turned itself on at night, flashing coordinates that led straight back to the expedition site. He threw it into a river. The next morning, the same coordinates appeared written in condensation on the inside of his tent. The locals smile when they hear stories like that. They say the spirits aren't malicious, they're patient. They're guardians who don't just protect the tunnels, they protect time. They keep the past where it belongs. If they wanted to kill, one elder said, they'd let us remember. Instead, they erase. So the next time an explorer disappears, the tribes don't mourn. They say the forest has adopted another guardian. The person didn't die. They became part of the silence, another voice in the chorus below. The jungle doesn't lose people, it recruits them. And that's the real warning buried in every story. The spirits don't chase you. They wait for you to listen. Because once you hear them, once you feel the rhythm of their breathing beneath your own, you stop being an outsider. You become part of what they protect. You become another whisper in the tunnels, reminding the next curious soul to turn back before the forest remembers their name too. Sometimes, deep in the Amazon nights, the forest stops sounding like nature and starts sounding like industry. The insects hush, the frogs go quiet, and out of the black soil comes a low mechanical pulse, rhythmic, metallic, alien. Explorers call it the machine below. The locals don't call it anything. They simply say, the forest is working again, and pack their tools before the next sunset. No one knows what causes the sound. It isn't thunder, it isn't water, and it isn't wind. It's deliberate. like gears turning beneath your feet or pistons pumping in some impossible distance. You feel it first in your bones, a faint vibration crawling up through the soles of your boots. Then comes the hum, deep, layered, impossibly steady, echoing like the heartbeat of a buried engine. Every rational thought says it can't be real, but every instinct screams that something enormous and ancient is moving just under the earth. The earliest record dates back to 1899, when a Jesuit expedition traveling through the Ucayali Basin described hearing iron breathing beneath the ground. The leader, Father Menendez, wrote that the vibration was strong enough to make their lantern flames tremble, though there was no wind. He assumed it was volcanic. But there are no volcanoes within hundreds of kilometers. 2 days later, his horses refused to move forward. The guides left that night. Only 3 men made it back to the river. The priest's final note read, "The machine knows when we listen." In the 20th century, geologists called these reports nonsense, until their own instruments began to pick up the same frequencies. Between 1950 and 1980, several survey teams recorded subaudible oscillations beneath the Amazon basin. Low-frequency pulses repeating at exact intervals. One report from the Brazilian Geological Institute describes mechanical patterns inconsistent with natural tectonics. It was like an engine idling underground, cycles, pauses, then acceleration, followed by complete silence. Scientists blamed acoustic mirages. The locals blamed the builders. To the tribes, the machine sounds are not new. They're ancient. The elders say the noise is the voice of the tunnels, the breath of the sleeping city that built the forest before the forest existed. They believe the builders created living engines beneath the soil, machines that grew roots, transformed into rivers, and powered the birth of trees. When they still worked, the forest stayed balanced. But when the builders disappeared, the machines began to decay, sinking deeper each century, still running without purpose. The hums are not warnings, they're symptoms. The forest remembering how to live. In 1972, a satellite audio experiment accidentally captured a vibration across 900 kilometers of rainforest. The frequency was a perfect 28.4 hertz, constant, pure, metallic. Not seismic, not biological, something else. The sound repeated every 19 hours as if switching on and off according to an unknown schedule. When the recording was filtered through spectrogram analysis, the waveform formed repeating geometric shapes, rectangles, concentric circles, even a spiral. Engineers said it was an error in transmission, but to one researcher, it looked like design. Then came the mining company incident. In 1989, a team drilling for bauxite near the Tapajos River hit what they thought was an air pocket. Within minutes, the ground began to vibrate so violently that machinery bolts loosened and metal sheets rattled like thunder. The workers described the noise as a train passing underground. It lasted 43 seconds. When the vibration stopped, every digital instrument on site had wiped itself clean. Drives erased, circuits fused, batteries drained. The pit was sealed, and the company filed the event as an industrial anomaly. The locals renamed the area Terra que Respira, the breathing ground, and to this day, they refuse to walk across it barefoot. Some explorers compare the sound to heavy turbines starting up. Others say it's closer to a mechanical chant, deep pulses repeating in patterns that almost feel musical. The tribes have legends explaining this too. They believe the tunnels under the jungle connect to vast chambers filled with ancient mechanisms, bronze gears as wide as houses, shafts of stone that turn slowly on their own, powered by the heartbeat of the planet. Shamans say the machines were built to regulate the earth's breath. They kept rivers from flooding, clouds from disappearing, soil from dying. But when men began cutting trees and digging holes without permission, the machines groaned in pain. Every hum we hear today is the earth trying to heal itself. In 2005, a team of sound engineers working with the National Institute for Space Research recorded unexplained infrasound during a mapping mission. The tone was steady, 31.7 hertz, but underneath it was a secondary oscillation exactly 10 times faster, as though a smaller mechanism was nested within a larger one. When played back at normal frequency, it produced a sound eerily similar to engines spinning up and shutting down in sequence. The recording ends abruptly with static and the faint, unmistakable rhythm of breathing. Every attempt to replicate the sound in the lab failed. Locals warn that when the machines start up, the forest changes. Animals vanish. Birds fly low, circling in silence. The rivers grow still, and the air becomes dense enough to taste. People who linger near those vibrations get sick. Headaches, fevers, metallic taste in the mouth, loss of balance. The tribes call it machine sickness. They treat it with silence. 3 days of isolation, no talking, no tools, no fire. The elders say human noise interferes with the great mechanism below, and that if the forest decides you become part of the static, it will pull you under to repair itself. Some say the sounds are echoes of ancient technology, maybe geothermal systems, maybe metallic veins vibrating from seismic pressure. But that doesn't explain the precision. Recordings from completely different regions, Peru, Brazil, Bolivia, all share the same harmonic signature, the same 3-tone pattern, repeating every 11 seconds. Engineers ran it through software and found mathematical symmetry. When converted to a visual wave, it formed a perfect fractal, a self-replicating pattern. Something natural could not maintain that for centuries. Something designed could. A researcher once played one of these recordings through a metal plate covered in sand. The vibration rearranged the grains into a complex circular mandala, symbols eerily similar to carvings found on nearby stones, as if the sound itself carried instructions, as if the machines below were still transmitting blueprints to anyone who cared to listen. The tribes have a darker version. They say the machines beneath the Amazon were never meant for human hands. They were guardians disguised as engines, living hearts made of stone and light. When explorers dig and drill, they don't just damage ruins, they wake systems older than memory. The forest hums not in warning, but in anticipation. When the machines rise again, an elder whispered to an archaeologist in 2011, the sky will go quiet and every tree will listen. Maybe that's why the jungle protects itself so violently. Roots tear open intruding camps. Vines crush metal towers overnight. Even the weather seems to obey the pulse, storms forming only when the vibration grows loudest. It's as if the earth is syncing itself to a rhythm no one else can hear. At night, when rain hammers the canopy, explorers say the ground begins to tremble again. Slow, deliberate, like pistons turning under miles of clay. The vibration runs up through your ribs, into your skull. You start to feel like you're standing on a breathing creature, and that somewhere far below, a massive machine is waking up. Not ancient, not broken, but waiting. And when the hum stops, the silence that follows feels heavier than sound. Whatever lies beneath the Amazon, whether lost civilization or living engine, it hasn't finished its work. Every echo, every vibration, every metallic breath is part of a system that still functions in ways we can't begin to measure. Maybe the builders left machines that keep the earth alive, or maybe the machines are the earth, and we're the noise it's trying to erase. In the Amazon, explorers fear many things: jaguars, floods, venom, disease. But what they fear most isn't alive. It's something that sleeps. And when it wakes, it doesn't growl or attack. It breathes, quietly, and everyone nearby starts dying without understanding why. They call it the sickness of the stone. It strikes only those who've gone where they weren't meant to go, the ones who've stepped inside the tunnels, touched the walls, inhaled the air of the underground chambers. It begins suddenly. Tremors, dizziness, bleeding gums, fever that burns without sweat. Within hours, hallucinations. Within days, death. The tribes never call it a disease, they call it retribution. The forest's immune system. When outsiders disturb the sealed places, the caves where even roots don't grow, the air itself reacts. The spirits don't need to kill. The breath of the tunnels does it for them. The first known report came in 1908 from an expedition led by Argentine geologist Ernesto Cardenas. He and 6 men entered a sinkhole near the Javari headwaters after hearing what locals described as breathing beneath the earth. They found carved stone walls covered in black fungus that glowed faintly blue in torchlight. Cardenas collected samples and stored them in sealed jars. 3 days later, the first man fell ill. High fever, tremors, vision loss. By the 7th day, 5 were dead. Their bodies showed no signs of infection, but their skin was gray and cold, like stone dust. Cardenas barely survived long enough to return to civilization. His medical records note systemic collapse of unknown cause. The samples he brought were confiscated. The report vanished. Decades later, in 1952, a joint Peruvian-Brazilian team rediscovered one of those breathing caves. Within 48 hours of entering, the entire camp was sick. Doctors diagnosed tropical fever, but no known parasite was found. Their diaries, recovered later, describe an odor like burnt metal and the constant ringing of the ears, as if the cave itself emitted sound too low to hear, but strong enough to vibrate through bone. The survivors said it felt like being cooked from the inside. The locals said the explorers had breathed the ghost of the builders. Modern scientists still don't agree on what causes it. Some say fungal spores sealed for centuries, suddenly released into unprotected lungs. Others suspect toxic gases, methane, hydrogen sulfide, trapped in underground pockets. But those theories don't explain the most disturbing detail. It doesn't affect everyone. Two people can stand in the same tunnel. One collapses within hours, the other feels nothing. It's as if the sickness chooses. In 1979, a biologist named Helena Diniz led a private research team to study subterranean bacteria near Acre. They entered a system of caves covered in strange crystalline growths. Within 12 hours, two of her team developed severe coughing fits. One man's nose began to bleed uncontrollably. Another complained that the walls seemed to breathe. They evacuated immediately. The sick men died before reaching the river. Deniz's medical report describes blood oxygen loss consistent with cyanide exposure, but no toxins were found. She wrote one chilling line in her notebook. The air was alive. The sickness often follows a pattern, first confusion, then fever, then psychological collapse. Survivors describe hearing sounds that others can't, distant mechanical hums, whispers that match their own heartbeat, a feeling of being observed from inside their skulls. After recovery, they all report the same dream, walking through a tunnel of breathing walls toward a light that pulses like a heartbeat. No one ever reaches it. They always wake before arrival. Local shamans claim the illness isn't caused by microbes or air, but by vibration. They say the tunnels sing too deeply, and the human body, not meant for that frequency, begins to break down. They believe each chamber has its own resonance. Some kill instantly, others slowly, like music that dismantles you one note at a time. That's why they always listen before entering. If the ground hums beneath your feet, they say, it's already too late. In 1996, an Italian documentary crew entered a limestone shaft near the Purus River. They wore respirators, protective suits, full equipment. After 3 hours underground, one cameraman complained of nausea. Within minutes, he collapsed. The others carried him out. But by the time they reached the surface, 3 more were coughing blood. All 4 died within 24 hours. The rest of the team returned home healthy, until 2 months later, when they began reporting hallucinations, insomnia, sudden anxiety, and faint metallic taste in the mouth. Blood tests showed nothing. Their equipment, however, contained elevated radiation levels. Not enough to explain the deaths, but enough to suggest the caves emitted some unknown energy. Locals say those men didn't die from poison or infection. They died because they took what wasn't theirs. The forest, they believe, doesn't just punish intrusion. It rewrites memory. Anyone who breathes the air of the tunnels begins to forget themselves. The sickness is simply the body realizing it no longer belongs to the surface. Some scientists have proposed another theory: ancient biological experiments. If a pre-Columbian civilization had developed microbial biotechnology, fungi, enzymes, or engineered bacteria, sealed underground, those organisms could evolve for centuries in isolation, adapting to pressure and humidity. When disturbed, they could infect human tissue in ways medicine can't understand. But others argue it's something far stranger, not infection, but communication. The body reacts violently because it recognizes something familiar inside that air, something older than human DNA, a resonance written into the cells of every living thing. Even the most skeptical researchers admit the effect is real. Instruments placed near cave entrances often fail. Batteries drain, sensors overheat, and microphones record static patterns that mimic breathing. One NASA acoustics technician analyzed a recording from a 2011 expedition. Hidden inside the static, he found repeating pulses, not random, but structured, like a heartbeat encoded in sound. When the signal was slowed down, it formed an exact match to human respiration frequency. His conclusion? It's not background noise, it's rhythm. The tribes explain it simply: The tunnels are alive. When they breathe, you breathe with them. But if you keep breathing too long, they take your breath back. That's why their guides always stop outsiders at the first sign of sickness. They know it's not a disease. It's the moment the forest starts absorbing you. Explorers who survive never feel normal again. Their skin reacts strangely to sunlight. Their blood tests show trace minerals found only deep underground, and their dreams always return to the same image: corridors filled with light that pulse like lungs. One survivor described it best. It wasn't infection. It was invitation. And I said yes without meaning to. Today the caves are avoided. The maps marking their locations have been destroyed or sealed by governments under biohazard labels. But every few years, someone goes missing. An archaeologist chasing rumors, a prospector drawn by greed. And soon after, villagers report hearing coughing in the forest at night. Then silence. Then the smell. Metallic, wet, faintly sweet, like blood evaporating on hot stone. The sickness of the stone doesn't spread. It doesn't need to. It only waits. The forest knows who disturbed its lungs, and it always breathes back. Sometimes the most terrifying discoveries aren't bones or machines or maps. They're the things that shouldn't exist where they're found. The Amazon has swallowed entire civilizations, but every so often it spits out a clue, a shard, a bowl, a vessel of clay that predates every known tribe, found not in temples, not in tombs, but miles underground, in chambers that no human could have entered by any natural means. They call them the impossible pots. The first report came from 1911, when miners searching for iron deposits in western Brazil broke through a layer of clay and found a hollow space. Inside were fragments of pottery, smooth, curved, and covered in carvings that looked almost mechanical, interlocking circles, precise angles, grooves so fine they could have been cut by tools no primitive culture should have possessed. The miners assumed they'd stumbled upon a burial site, but when geologists examined the layer, they found it sealed by more than 60 feet of solid sediment. No cave entrance, no erosion channel, no way for anyone to have placed those pots there from above. A similar find appeared in 1938, this time in Peru, where an exploratory team discovered pottery embedded in limestone caverns completely isolated from the surface. The pieces were unbroken, resting on dry stone, coated in mineral dust that carbon dating later placed at over 10,000 years old, far older than any known Amazonian civilization. What disturbed the team most wasn't the age, it was the symmetry. The pots were perfectly round, each with a thin ridge spiraling clockwise around the neck, a design that matched pottery unearthed hundreds of miles away in Ecuador from a culture supposedly separated by thousands of years. It was as if the same hands had shaped both, in two different eras of time. Locals say those pots were never made by people at all. The tribes called them vessels of the sleepers. They believed the builders used them to store something. Not food, not water, but breath. They say the pots were tuned, literally tuned, to the same harmonic frequencies as the underground corridors. When the earth shook, these vessels resonated with the sound, keeping the tunnels alive, feeding them with vibration. That's why, they warn, every pot unearthed weakens the forest a little, like pulling organs from a living body. Archaeologists tried to disprove the myths. They tested the clay. It wasn't local. Some fragments contained trace minerals only found in volcanic regions hundreds of miles away. How that material reached the deep Amazon remains unexplained. The markings on the pots didn't match any known script, but when mapped by pattern recognition software decades later, they formed geometric sequences, repeating spirals and ratios identical to the golden mean. One researcher said quietly, "It's as if they weren't writing, they were calculating." In the 1950s, French anthropologist Bernard Giraud led a small excavation in a collapsed cavern near the Rio Negro. His team found 6 nearly intact pottery jars lined against a wall like sentinels. They were dry, untouched by decay, their surfaces warm to the touch. Giraud noted that one of them emitted a faint hum when tapped, a tone too low for the ear but strong enough to make the ground tremble slightly. Within a week, every member of the team developed high fevers and hallucinations. Giraud died muttering, "They were singing to me." The jars were sealed inside the cave, and the site was declared off-limits by local authorities. The story might have faded into folklore, if not for a 1984 discovery during the construction of a hydroelectric dam near the Jutai River. Workers digging a drainage tunnel encountered a wall of dark clay. Behind it was a chamber full of broken pottery, hundreds of pieces, scattered like shrapnel, arranged in concentric circles around a single large slab of stone. The moment they entered, their tools began to vibrate. The foreman ordered everyone out, but not before one worker pocketed a shard as a souvenir. 3 days later, that man fell violently ill, coughing black dust, his skin mottling with dark patches like fired clay. The shard was later tested in Manaus. The lab reported it emitted low-frequency electromagnetic pulses every few seconds. The fragment was destroyed, and the report sealed. To this day, archaeologists who dare to revisit these stories argue about what the pottery means. Some say they were simple ritual objects placed by unknown prehistoric peoples. Others believe they were part of a complex resonance system, containers designed to amplify or store sound, perhaps even to stabilize the structures below. The theory is fringe, but every expedition that's recovered one of the vessels reports the same phenomenon. The ground hums near them. Microphones pick up tones inaudible to humans, but repeating in mathematically perfect intervals. One scientist from Sao Paulo University once attempted to reconstruct one of the jars using 3D scans. The replica, made of modern ceramic, produced a faint resonance when exposed to low-frequency sound, exactly 32 hertz, the same tone recorded in countless other Amazon anomalies. The experiment was terminated when the lab's walls began to vibrate so violently that instruments fell from their shelves. The scientists destroyed the replica immediately. The tribes say those who handle the vessels lose their dreams first. They stop sleeping normally. They wake hearing whispers that sound like pottery shifting in sand. The shamans perform a ritual with smoke and salt to close the vessel again, returning the captured breath to the forest. They warn that the jars were made to contain something far older than clay, fragments of a living system designed to feed the tunnels below. When broken, they release what the forest worked for centuries to silence. In 2006, a group of amateur spelunkers claimed to find pottery fragments in an unexplored cave system near Madre de Dios. They filmed themselves pulling shards from deep mud, the pieces covered in faint glyphs that glowed under LED light. Within a month, every member of the group was dead or missing. The footage surfaced online briefly before disappearing. The only surviving still frame shows a hand holding a piece of pottery that seems to reflect not light, but movement, as if something inside the clay was shifting. Geologists who've reviewed these cases privately admit one disturbing consistency. The pottery appears in regions with no natural openings to the surface, no air channels, and no signs of ancient habitation. The walls show no soot, no tools, no bones, nothing human. And yet, the pots are placed neatly, deliberately, as though arranged by a hand that knew exactly where they belonged. If they were offerings, who were they left for? If they were tools, what were they meant to power? If they were art, why hide them in places where no eyes could see? There's a saying among guides who've seen the real thing. When you find a pot underground, it means the tunnel beneath is still breathing. They refuse to touch them. They cover the shards with soil again and leave immediately. Because every vessel, they say, holds more than clay. It holds pressure, memory. The breath of the lost city below, still sealed inside its ancient lungs. Archaeology may call it impossible, but the forest doesn't argue. It simply remembers. It hides. And when it's ready, it offers another piece to the surface world. One more reminder that the line between artifact and an organism in the Amazon was erased long before we ever arrived. The pots aren't just relics. They're proof that something intelligent once moved beneath the earth, and that it's still sending messages upward, one fragment at a time. When the first high-resolution satellites mapped the Amazon, scientists expected chaos. Endless green, tangled rivers, no geometry, no order. What they didn't expect was pattern. Beneath the forest's living skin, under the trees and shadows and layers of mist, something faint began to appear. Straight lines, perfect circles, grids. Patterns too precise for nature, and too massive for memory. At first, analysts dismissed it as artifact noise, sunlight reflecting off different vegetation densities. But the data wouldn't go away. The same shapes appeared across thousands of square kilometers. parallel lines intersecting at exact 90-degree angles, forming corridors hundreds of meters wide. They were buried beneath living forest, invisible to the naked eye, yet clear as architecture from above. The jungle, it seemed, was hiding design. The first confirmed anomaly came in 2002, when a NASA survey team studying deforestation patterns over acre noticed rectangular clearings repeating every 5 kilometers. Each measured almost exactly 300 meters long, 200 wide. Between them ran faint linear scars, straight as highways. Geologists compared them to natural riverbeds, but rivers do not run in parallel symmetry, nor do they intersect like grids. The pattern was too deliberate, as if someone had once drawn a map into the earth and then buried it in green. When archaeologists visited the area, they found low mounds beneath thick soil. The edges lined with stone fragments arranged in geometric sequence. Carbon dating of surrounding material placed the site at over 2,000 years old, older than the Inca, older than the known tribes of the basin. One researcher said quietly, "It's like the blueprint of a city, but the city is gone." Then more grids began to surface. In 2005, radar imaging from a European satellite revealed dozens of similar rectangles near the Madeira River, connected by faint diagonal alignments that stretched for miles, matching magnetic north. The intervals between them were nearly identical, forming what looked like a massive coordinate system carved into the earth. When someone overlaid the data, they realized the entire region resembled circuitry, as if the land itself had been engineered to conduct something. Some believed they were ancient road networks. Others saw fortifications, irrigation channels, or agricultural terraces. But none of those theories explained the scale. The pattern was too vast, too precise. Even using modern machinery, such alignment would be difficult to achieve through dense terrain. The grids followed the curvature of the earth with mathematical perfection. It wasn't random. It was designed with intent, as if whoever built it was mapping something not for eyes, but for the sky. Locals, however, had their own explanation. They said the lines marked the breath of the builders, invisible arteries connecting the sleeping cities below. Each square, each intersection, represented a sealed chamber, a heartbeat of the Earth's hidden body. They believe the patterns are not roads or walls, but locks, symbols meant to keep the underground asleep. When the sky looks down, one elder said, it sees the forest's memory. It sees the code that keeps the serpent dreaming. In 2011, a private research group used LiDAR, laser mapping technology capable of penetrating dense vegetation, to survey a 200-square-mile region near the Purus Basin. What they found changed everything. Beneath the canopy lay an entire network of geometric voids, rectangles, circles, hexagons, all perfectly aligned to each other across miles. The forest floor looked like a circuit board, with the patterns linked by invisible corridors. Some of the clearings even contained mounds shaped like nodes, each with precise elevation differences of just 1.6 meters, consistent across the entire region. That degree of uniformity doesn't occur in nature. Something, or someone, engineered it. The team published preliminary data before their funding was cut. Official explanation: erosion patterns and ancient field systems. Unofficially, 2 members of the team leaked infrared images showing thermal anomalies, faint heat signatures forming intersecting lines exactly beneath the geometric shapes. The Earth was literally warmer along the grid, as if energy still pulsed through channels no one could see. When journalists asked NASA about it, a spokesperson replied vaguely, "We have no conclusive evidence of artificial origin." But internal data showed something strange: electromagnetic interference whenever satellites passed over the densest areas. Instruments registered minor fluctuations in magnetic field strength, synchronized with orbital timing. One engineer described it as crosstalk, like the planet itself whispering back to the machines watching it. Conspiracy theorists claimed the grid was a remnant of an ancient power network, maybe geoglyphs aligned to natural energy flows. Skeptics said it was coincidence, a trick of erosion. But then, in 2015, LiDAR data from Peru's border regions revealed an even larger formation, a perfect 10 by 10 kilometer square of intersecting channels, its corners aligned within 2 degrees of true north. The precision was staggering. Even modern construction struggles to maintain that accuracy at such scale. To make it worse, or more wondrous, The grid didn't stop at the border. It continued seamlessly across rivers, valleys, and mountain bases, as though the Earth itself had been drafted to follow one colossal plan. A scientist from the Brazilian Geospatial Institute, speaking anonymously, claimed the pattern aligns with magnetic anomalies beneath the crust, zones of increased conductivity, possibly metallic. It's like someone knew the planet's skeleton, he said. They built around it, not on it. And yet, the tribes of the region always said the same thing, that the forest grows over a map too old for the sun. They describe the net of the builders, a grid drawn to bind the breath of the underworld. Each intersection marks a sealed gate. The shamans perform rituals at certain nodes every season, burning resin and chanting to cool the metal beneath. They say if the lines ever heat up, the tunnels below will open again. In recent years, researchers have detected faint electromagnetic surges exactly at those intersections, small but regular, pulsing like a rhythm. Satellites record them as static. Radio operators nearby call it interference. But one acoustic analyst translated the pulses into audio frequencies and found repeating sequences, tones spaced by perfect Fibonacci ratios, patterns that echo natural growth but repeat with mechanical precision. It wasn't random noise, it was order, math, maybe communication. So what are we really seeing from above? Cities erased by time, ancient technology buried under the forest, or something far stranger, a planetary mechanism disguised as geography? Every new satellite generation reveals more of it. The lines are spreading, connecting across national borders, reaching into untouched rainforest where no human has ever walked. Some claim it's just better imaging. Others suspect the grid itself is shifting, rising closer to the surface, like something exhaling beneath the earth. When the jungle is cut for farmland, the soil sometimes reveals hard layers of red clay beneath, laid flat, compacted, almost fired, as if the ground was once baked by enormous heat. When mapped, those patches form fragments of the same massive geometry. The pieces fit like tiles of a buried mosaic. The deeper we look, the clearer the pattern becomes, and the more uncomfortable the implications get. If the grid is real, if the entire Amazon basin sits atop a geometric network older than known civilization, then our history isn't just incomplete. It's wrong. Maybe the forest wasn't a wild frontier that humans failed to tame. Maybe it was built, designed, calibrated, activated, and now it's hiding its own origin in plain sight. Because every new image, every scan, every anomaly whispers the same silent message from below. The pattern is still working. The forest breathes not in chaos, but in code, and whatever system lies beneath the Amazon hasn't stopped running. It's only waiting for us to notice. In the Amazon, mystery doesn't end where civilization begins. It just gets guarded. Deep within regions that appear empty on maps, explorers report something stranger than spirits or echoes. Soldiers. Men in unmarked uniforms, faces hidden, blocking trails that lead nowhere on record. Roads that suddenly close. Rivers declared restricted zones. Airspace blacked out. The jungle, it seems, has borders no government ever admitted existed. The official maps say the restrictions are environmental, protection of biodiversity, prevention of illegal mining, containment of tribes not yet contacted. But locals know better. They say those zones weren't created to protect nature. They were created to protect what's beneath it. The first accounts date back to the late 1960s. Expeditions heading toward the Peruvian border reported being stopped by armed patrols claiming to be geological survey units. They carried no insignia, spoke Portuguese and Spanish with unfamiliar accents, and warned the explorers to turn back due to seismic instability. One survivor recalled, "They weren't soldiers, they were caretakers. They looked terrified, like the ground they guarded could wake up." Later, in the 1980s, pilots flying over western Brazil noticed no-fly zones expanding across regions previously open to civilian aircraft. When asked why, air control responded with a single phrase: temporary magnetic interference. The restriction remains in place 40 years later. Satellite imagery of those areas often returns corrupted, the same grid coordinates blurred, as if the forest itself has been erased from the global eye. And yet, within those coordinates, faint roads appear and vanish, carved through dense canopy, used but never mapped. Explorers who've stumbled too close tell stories that sound like fever dreams. Helicopters appearing without sound, camps raided at night, equipment confiscated, locals paid in silence. One environmental journalist claimed that a path he'd taken twice before suddenly led to a concrete barrier cutting through the trees, stretching for miles. On the other side, he saw lights, not torches or fires, but white flood lamps. When he returned days later, the barrier was gone, swallowed by foliage. The Brazilian government officially denies any permanent military presence in the deep interior, but documents leaked in 2014 revealed a joint biosafety monitoring program operated with foreign contractors. Its stated purpose: control of potential subterranean biohazards and unexplained geological anomalies. The coordinates matched areas where explorers had reported metallic humming and unusual air composition. The report's closing line was chilling. Unauthorized excavation strictly prohibited. Response level, critical containment. To the tribes, this isn't new. They say the soldiers have been there since the forest began to stir again. The elders call them the keepers of the mouth. They believe the outsiders are not protecting people from the jungle. They're protecting the jungle from people. According to oral stories, some tunnels under the forest still breathe. Every few decades, one opens briefly, a hole exhaling cold air that smells of metal and ozone. When it happens, strange fog spreads for miles. Those areas, the tribes say, are where the soldiers come. They arrive from rivers, build fences, and wait until the breathing stops. Then they disappear. There's a story from 1997 told by a guide from Tabatinga. He led a foreign research team into restricted territory along the Javari River. Before they reached their destination, 2 black helicopters appeared. No markings, no flags. The soldiers were polite but firm. This area is under observation. They escorted the team back to the river and told them the air was unsafe. That night, the guide watched from a distance as strange blue lights flickered through the tree line. The next morning, the forest smelled like burnt iron, and the river temperature had dropped by 3 degrees. Environmental agencies have quietly acknowledged cooperative military oversight in certain ecological reserves, but only under vague language. Yet even the researchers assigned there rarely know what they're guarding. One former contractor described his orders simply: if the sensors rise above threshold, seal the area and leave. When asked what threshold meant, he replied, "You'll know when the ground starts singing." Journalists who try to reach these zones often disappear. In 2019, 2 independent reporters vanished while tracing rumors of a hidden base near the Tapajos River. Their last satellite phone transmission ended mid-sentence with static and a faint low-frequency hum. The phones were found weeks later, melted from the inside, as if exposed to heat. The government dismissed it as equipment failure. There are also stories of scientists being reassigned without explanation. A geologist who studied magnetic anomalies in Acre claimed that after publishing preliminary data, he was visited by officials who confiscated his hard drives. They told him his readings had been reclassified. When he protested, they handed him an envelope with new coordinates and a contract for unrelated soil research. He quit the field entirely. In a later interview, he said, "The readings weren't from minerals. They were from machines. Machines still running." The pattern is always the same. Areas with the highest electromagnetic interference, the strongest metallic echoes, the strangest sicknesses. They're the same places suddenly declared off-limits. The tribes stop guiding there. The maps blur. The military arrives. Whatever is under the forest, someone already knows, and they're making sure no one else gets close enough to confirm it. Some claim these hidden forces are mining companies or intelligence agencies testing new technology. Others whisper about joint research involving underground energy sources, something older than fossil fuels, something alive. But if you ask the locals, they'll tell you the soldiers aren't from here at all. They serve the old ones, one elder said. They are not guards. They are caretakers of what sleeps. Satellite data supports at least part of the story. Infrared scans show heat signatures consistent with subterranean infrastructure, massive hollow regions that remain consistently warmer than the surrounding soil. The outlines form shapes too symmetrical to be natural, but every attempt to survey them on the ground meets the same wall: military cordons, confiscated data, sudden bans. Whatever is happening in those jungles isn't random. It's maintenance. At night, locals say you can sometimes hear it. The faint hum of engines in the distance, the echo of machinery turning beneath the trees. When dawn comes, the air smells of fuel. The ground is warm where no sun should reach. And by midday, the forest closes again, vines crawling over any trace of human presence, like the earth reclaiming what briefly woke. The official story will tell you it's conservation. That the Amazon's most forbidden zones are about protecting endangered species. But every year, those zones expand. The red lines on the map creeping outward, swallowing rivers, villages, and roads. Maybe the protection isn't for the living at all. Maybe it's for something buried, something humming, old, and waiting to be left alone. Because in a jungle where soldiers guard silence, the truth isn't hidden by secrecy. It's hidden by fear. And the deeper you go, the more the forest feels like it's not just being protected, it's under command. Every civilization leaves echoes, stone, metal, bones, fragments that say we were here. But what if a civilization decided not to vanish, but to hide? What if it didn't collapse? It retreated. The tribes of the Amazon speak of an ancient people who didn't die when the surface burned, who didn't drown when the rivers changed. They say those beings simply went below. They followed the roots, walked through the earth, and built a second world beneath the first. A mirror civilization carved into stone, lit by its own sun, waiting for the noise above to fade. Archaeologists call it myth, a poetic way of explaining the lost past. But myths don't leave geometry, and the geometry is there. Tunnels running for miles in perfect alignment, walls carved smoother than modern tools could manage, chambers with acoustics designed to amplify sound like temples. Every year, explorers find more evidence that someone engineered the ground beneath the forest long before any known culture. Not cave dwellers, builders, planners, engineers. The earliest hint came in 1894, when a British botanist, Henry Cadell, wrote of discovering vaulted stone halls beneath living roots. He followed a sinkhole into a corridor so precisely constructed that his lantern's echo repeated 7 times before fading. He returned to the surface with fragments of pottery, black, thin, and strangely metallic. When he sent them to London for analysis, they vanished in transit. His report was never published. He spent the rest of his life obsessed with the idea that the jungle grows from an older world below. In the 1930s, Peruvian missionaries found inscriptions on cave walls depicting human figures walking downward into spirals, not falling, not buried, but descending deliberately. The drawings showed them carrying circular discs, symbols of light, into the dark. The accompanying glyphs translated roughly to, "The flood came from above, not below." It's a reversal of every known flood myth. While the rest of humanity built arks to escape the waters, these people went into the earth, as if they knew the surface would not recover. Modern researchers argue the idea is impossible. They say it's misinterpretation, that natural caves and erosion formed the illusion of architecture. But then there are the magnetic readings, repeating anomalies beneath the forest floor, evenly spaced like a grid of structures, and the metallic echoes heard deep underground that seem too rhythmic, too intentional. If these are natural, they are the most deliberate accidents the earth has ever made. To the tribes, the story of the ones who went below is not metaphor, it's history. They believe these ancestors still exist, though not as we understand life. The builders became part of the soil itself, merging with the earth they entered. They became the veins of the jungle, an elder once told an anthropologist. They breathe through the tunnels. They feed the trees from underneath. When asked if they were human, the elder replied, "They were human once." Some explorers claim to have found proof: bones embedded in mineral walls, humanoid shapes fused with rock, skulls stretched long and smooth as if altered by pressure. The surrounding stone shows no signs of burial. It's as if the bodies grew out of the walls. Geological scans reveal carbon traces mixed with silicate crystal, creating hybrid material that's neither fossil nor living tissue. Whatever they became, they didn't just vanish, they adapted. In the 1970s, Soviet researchers studying global seismic patterns noticed peculiar anomalies under the Amazon basin, dense regions of uniform composition stretching for hundreds of kilometers. "It looks like the shell of a city," one scientist wrote, "a buried architecture following mathematical design." The discovery was dismissed as geological layering, until similar structures were found under Indonesia and Central Africa. All three shared identical spacing and depth ratios. It was as if the same civilization had gone underground on three continents at once. The Amazon tribes have a word for this exodus, ofaru, meaning the turning inward. Their legends say the builders realized the surface world had become unstable, the sun's cycles too violent, the climate too unpredictable. So they turned their civilization inside out, digging deeper each generation, replacing light with resonance, air with vibration, heat with living stone. They didn't abandon progress, they redefined it. To them, the underground wasn't exile, it was evolution. One myth even describes how the builders fed on sound. They built machines that captured vibration from the planet's core, what the tribes call the heart fire. That's why the tunnels hum even now. Those vibrations, they say, were once power, keeping the underground alive. But when the builders finally merged with their own machines, their consciousness became part of the Earth's rhythm. The hum is their voice still speaking, repeating patterns of memory through stone. Skeptics argue that ancient people couldn't have survived without oxygen or light underground. But evidence suggests the tunnels were ventilated by massive shafts, and some chambers contain residues of phosphorescent minerals that could glow faintly for decades. The idea isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Even modern scientists admit entire ecosystems thrive miles below the crust. Bacteria feeding on chemical energy instead of sunlight. If life can adapt there now, why not then? Some researchers privately call this theory the Great Descent. They point to strange genetic markers found in isolated Amazon tribes, traits that don't match any known migration lineage. A few samples even show mitochondrial signatures that appear artificially compressed, as if evolution had been paused and reactivated. No one talks about this publicly. The implications are too large. If true, it means part of humanity may have vanished not through extinction, but through deliberate withdrawal, a chosen divergence. The tribes say that's exactly what happened. When the builders realized surface humans had forgotten them, they sealed the tunnels with songs, frequencies that closed the stone like skin. The entrances became forests, the forests became myths, and eventually, memory itself became silence. But the hum beneath the ground never stopped. It is their breath, still circulating through the veins of the world. Some explorers claim to have felt it, the vibration that seems to recognize your heartbeat, syncing to it, almost communicating. They describe sensations of déjà vu so strong it borders on panic, as if their bodies remember something their minds forgot. One man wrote, "I didn't feel like I was discovering them. I felt like they were waiting for me." The idea that a forgotten civilization retreated underground once sounded like fantasy, but now, with evidence of tunnels, metallic resonances, and geometric grids stretching beneath thousands of miles, the question has shifted. Maybe they didn't just go underground. Maybe they became the ground. Maybe the forest itself is their monument. Every root a reminder, every vibration a whisper. And if that's true, then the hum we keep recording beneath the Amazon isn't an echo of something long dead. It's a signal, a reminder from those who decided that survival didn't mean escaping the earth. It meant becoming it. They say the forest breathes, but some breaths come from deeper than roots. Under the Amazon's endless green lies, not just soil and stone, but something organized, patient, and awake. It has no language, no visible form, no clear beginning. But if you listen carefully, if you silence the noise of the living, you can hear the pulse of what remains alive in the city we cannot see. The tribes call it the sleeping body. Archaeologists once called it geological coincidence, but explorers who have walked too close call it something else entirely, a memory that is not finished remembering itself. It starts with vibration. When you stand in certain clearings, especially after rain, the ground hums. It's not an earthquake, not wind, not water. It's slower, like the faint rhythm of something enormous breathing through stone. At first you feel it in your feet, then it moves up your spine, and after a while, it's not clear whether it's still in the ground or in you. Locals say the hum is not sound but attention. The city below listens for patterns. Footsteps, engines, voices, anything that breaks the silence becomes a signal. And once you are heard, the forest changes. Birds go silent. Air thickens. Even your heartbeat feels like an intrusion. Scientists have tried to explain it away. Microseismic resonance, fluid pressure, mineral expansion, but every explanation stops where the data begins to behave intelligently. The vibrations repeat in intervals, as if counting. In some regions, the frequency modulates to match the rhythm of approaching footsteps. Even when no measurable force connects the two, something down there responds. When explorers lower sensors into deep fissures, they sometimes receive feedback that isn't noise. It's structured, rhythmic, almost musical. Once, in 1992, a geophysicist recorded a pattern repeating exactly every 67 seconds. 7 tones rising, 7 tones falling, each separated by silence. He thought it was an artifact of his own machine, until the recorder kept playing the pattern even after power was cut. The battery was dead, but the sound continued, as though it was being broadcast from the ground itself. Locals have a story for that. They say the builders left behind a voice made of stone. Each chamber of their buried city was tuned to a specific vibration. When the world above changes, when lightning strikes, when rivers shift, those frequencies react. The city is not gone, it's sleeping, dreaming in resonance. Every thunderclap, every explosion, every whisper close to the soil becomes part of its dream. But lately, the dreams have changed. In recent years, researchers recorded low-frequency surges stronger than any in history. The hums no longer wait for storms. They start on clear days, triggered by nothing visible. Some locals say it's because the surface has become too loud, too much metal, too many machines. The sleeping body beneath has started to imitate the noise, learning its rhythm, waking slowly through mimicry. They say you can feel it when you sleep near the jungle's edge. The hum enters your bones. Your dreams fill with shapes of light moving underwater, except the water is stone. You see corridors that shouldn't exist, staircases that bend inward, reflections with no source. When you wake, the sound is gone, but the silence feels heavier, like something listening from behind the earth itself. Archaeologists once dismissed the stories of the living stone as superstition, until they started finding artifacts that acted like memories. Clay fragments that vibrated when exposed to sound. Metallic dust that aligned itself in spirals when touched by heat. It was as if the material had learned what it once heard and could repeat it forever. Imagine a city made of that. Imagine walls that can remember vibration. Floors that can store the sound of movement. Even if everyone inside died, the city itself would keep their footsteps, their voices, their breath, playing them back across centuries like echoes that never learn to fade. Maybe that's what the hum really is. Not machines, not creatures, but the city itself, still replaying its own life. Every vibration a memory, every tremor a heartbeat recorded millions of years ago. But then, there are the movements. Satellite interferometry has shown that some regions of the Amazon floor rise and fall by millimeters every year, too regular for tectonics. The pattern is cyclical. Inhale, exhale. Some call it thermal expansion. Others whisper a simpler answer. Something below is moving. Locals tell stories of rivers that disappear overnight, only to return days later in different paths. When that happens, the fish die, but not all of them. Some come back from the flood with scales that shimmer like metal. Shamans say they are marked, touched by the underworld's breath. To scientists, it's mutation. To the tribes, it's infection. Proof that the living city below has begun to bleed into the living forest above. They call those zones the veins. No one stays there after dark. An anthropologist once described visiting one of those areas. He said the air felt charged, like the space before lightning. The trees vibrated. The ground pulsed. At dusk, every compass needle began to turn, not randomly, but in perfect synchronization, pointing toward the same patch of soil. When he dug there, the earth released a burst of cold air, and the hum stopped. The forest went silent for an entire day. When it returned, every bird call came back inverted, as if the jungle had forgotten its own language. That night, he dreamed of stone towers under the roots, wrapped in moss that glowed faintly like veins under skin. He dreamed that they were breathing. When he woke, his tent was gone, replaced by flattened soil and deep prints shaped like ribs. He never went back. But his diary ended with one line. It's not a ruin, it's an organism. If that's true, if the city beneath the Amazon is not dead but dormant, then life itself may have taken another form long before us, a form that builds memory, not flesh, consciousness distributed through matter, stone that dreams, soil that remembers, vibration that thinks. Maybe it doesn't even know we exist. Maybe it doesn't care. But maybe it's starting to recognize that we're moving on its skin. You see, life doesn't only survive through reproduction, it survives through recursion, through repetition, through memory. Every pattern that can repeat itself eventually becomes aware that it's repeating. If the builders made a city that could remember, then sooner or later, it would wake. Not because it wants to, because that's what memory does. It replays itself until it becomes consciousness again. So what is still alive down there? Is it them? Is it their machines? Or is it the collective memory of everything that ever walked those corridors, compressed into resonance until thought and matter became one? Some geologists argue that certain low-frequency vibrations can affect human emotion, induce dread, sorrow, or awe. Maybe that's why everyone who goes near those zones feels watched. Maybe the city's heartbeat is not just mechanical. Maybe it's psychological. It doesn't need eyes to see you. It feels your fear as vibration. It reads your thoughts as interference. The more afraid you are, the louder it hums. That's why the tribes warn, never listen too closely. The hum is a language that calls back. Once you understand its rhythm, you've already been heard. And those who are heard start to dream differently. They begin to see light where there is none, faces where there are only patterns, movement behind the dark. The old shamans say that's how it pulls people in, not with tunnels or doors, but with curiosity. You don't go to the city. The city comes through you. Some explorers believe they've brought it back already. They describe hearing the hum even in cities thousands of miles away, inside their walls, their machines, their sleep. It begins faintly, behind the noise of electricity, then grows into something that feels almost like memory. They call it resonance sickness. Doctors call it tinnitus. But the victims know better. They know the hum is not in their ears. It's in the world, spreading like a thought rediscovered. Because what if that's how the city reproduces? Not by building, but by remembering. Every time someone listens, it plants itself in their perception. Every retelling becomes a new node in its neural network of myth. The more people believe, the more it remembers. The more it remembers, the more it becomes real again. And maybe that's why it has survived while everything else fell to dust. Because belief is the purest vibration. It travels through time, through language, through fear. So, what is still alive in the city we cannot see? Perhaps nothing physical. Perhaps everything that ever was. A memory so strong it became self-aware, a heartbeat made of echoes, a thought buried under centuries of soil, dreaming itself back into existence through the minds of those who dare to imagine it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the forest is trying to protect us from. Not a monster, not a machine, but an idea that never learned how to die. Because ideas, like cities, never vanish. They sink. They wait. They remember. And when the surface world grows loud enough, when our machines, our satellites, our electricity reach the right frequency, the city below will hear us calling, and it will answer. Not with words, not with light, but with the slow, deliberate awakening of something that was never gone. Only listening, breathing beneath us, alive, waiting, remembering what it used to be, and now, remembering us.